or in the office rather this week, it was a bit filled up with tech developments and everything. So it's been working around the clock with a lot of things. And I almost did not want to do off the cuff this morning because I felt that I may be a bit tired and everything. But I paused, I reflected, and just at the end of the day, really just thought about who is this for? And this is for you guys. So I'm in studio and live streaming to one or two different platforms now today again. So I'm just going to take a brief moment and quickly explain what is Off the Cuff. Off the Cuff is a live segment that we do every single Friday, or at least try to this time. On our links on socials, we've got forms that you can submit your questions or submit them during the week on DMs or, just via the links or as you chat to us. And the whole idea about Off the Cuff is entrepreneurs, founders, startups, business people with a passion and curiosity for business have inside of them, they've got all this curiosity and all these questions about business, especially when it comes to process development, especially when it comes to people management, team culture, and sales, and also the faith element thereof. Off the Cuff allows you, the entrepreneur, to submit your questions. And in the moment, live for the first time, as a business consultant, I read the questions for the first time and I give my first impromptu response based on that. That's where the off the cuff comes in the moment, giving that off the cuff answer. And what's the idea behind all of this? There are so many knowledges out there, so many great entrepreneurs and podcasts and everything to follow. But reality is, it's like going to church. You're not always in the position to raise your hand and ask a follow up question or ask a question how this relates to your business. And this is what Off the Cuff is. You're sitting with all the influence and all the work and all the knowledge and in your day-to-day operations in your business, or maybe you haven't even started your business. But these questions, these are the type of questions, curiosities, and kind of like obstacles current entrepreneurs are facing. So learn from them. And maybe you're not interested in starting a new business or not at all, and you came across this by chance. But chances are is someone that's starting their business about to, or maybe already has their own business. Why not tag them, share this? It's completely for free. We gain nothing from this. But at the end of the day, there might be something valuable in this type of questions that they also struggle with currently or might in the future struggle with. And not everything is a struggle. Sometimes it's just a push in the right direction. Why is that valuable from my side? As I said, I'm a business consultant. So my company usually gets paid by executives to figure these types of things out. We test them in the real world and we bring that practical advice condensed in off the cuff short snippets. I think this intro is longer than the answers, and bring that straight to you for the knowledge thereof. So maybe you find wisdom in this, maybe not. Check out our new newsletters are coming in next week. Follow along on the journey. We've got various contents out there. We've got Not Yet Mature Studios with a lot of podcasts on how to assist the daily entrepreneur in practical ways. But without further ado, this is Off the Cuff, and I really would love to start answering your questions. If I look across multiple screens, I do apologize. I've got a main screen camera right over there. I've got live on Instagram. This is my personal Instagram. Head over to Exemplar Capital for the more details thereof. And then obviously looking at TikTok as well. So you guys are more than welcome. This is for the entrepreneur. If you've got a passion and curiosity for entrepreneurship, for business, a love for sales, maybe in the sales environment or in middle management, or maybe you know someone, this is a time to share this with them, tag this with them, and get the content out there to assist the entrepreneur who we believe's got this massive calling in their lives. And if some of the audio is crap, and trialing and erroring as we go along, and we promise this one thing is each week I and my team will review everything and then we'll make the needed changes. So if something frustrated you today, apologies. We're really buffering out everything else. Historically speaking, all the other content are on our channels, and this is not the first time we've been doing this. So the first question we got in was, how do I deal with an employee who avoids responsibility? Now, there's a difference between someone who can't perform and someone who won't take ownership. And the second one is trickier because on the surface, they actually look busy. They respond, they, I would say, attend meetings. But when something goes wrong, it's always, someone else's fault or unclear or just kind of like in the bubble where people say it's miscommunication. So I'd say what you're dealing with isn't a skill gap, it's an ownership gap. And ownership doesn't grow in vague environments. If roles, outcomes, and accountability aren't clearly defined, people default to safety every single time. That's human nature. We want the shortest route to zero friction, right? So people default to safety, and safety usually means avoiding blame. So the shift is simple, but it's uncomfortable. Start assigning outcomes rather than assigning tasks. Instead of saying things like, can you handle this? You can try out words or phrases or the attitude of, you own this result. What does success look like? And how will we know if it's done? Make ownership quite visible. And when something slips, don't accept explanations without reflection. That's the important part. Ask, what could you have done differently? Because responsibility grows when avoidance is no longer an option. Ownership is, I would say, not personality, it's expectation. So the second question we got was, how do I know if I've outgrown someone on my team? And this for me, if I just off the cuff think about this is actually something that we sit a lot on the founders and scalers side of things, right? When you found a company or finding a company or starting off a company, your team members usually are people that is willing to do something. They've got friendship, loyalty, or anything. You mean they can trust their character. You don't need to explain to them how to do it. But as you scale a company, you move more towards something called, necessary skill set for the environment that you are in. So this is one of the harder realities of building a business. I would say because sometimes people who were right for the early stages are not always right for the next stage. And emotionally, that's the uncomfortable part. You've built history together. There's loyalty, there's shared effort, but business growth changes the game. The question to ask in this situation, or the approach to take, I'd say, um, is not really to ask, are they a good person? It's more in the attitude of, are they still the right fit for where we are going? As the business evolves, roles require different levels of thinking, different levels of speed, and different levels of decision making. If someone consistently struggles to keep up with the new demands, avoids growth, or resists change, it's a signal. And avoiding that signal, especially early on, doesn't help them either. And it especially doesn't help you. So sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is obviously to be honest. We've done plenty of podcasts on honesty versus modesty where I truly emphasize that they're not the same. It's the same with kindness and niceness, right? Being nice is not always kind, and being kind is not always nice, but we need to be kind. We don't actually always need to be nice. Growth requires this alignment, and alignment doesn't always last forever. The third question, by the way, welcome to Off the Cuff. We're doing 12 questions in this segment, various questions on company culture, sales. These are your questions that you submitted, questions that we answer in the moment off the cuff. If you know a fellow entrepreneur, someone in business, someone in sales, someone in management that you think they might find this valuable, please share it along or follow along on the journey. The next question we have is, how do I create a culture where people speak up? It's a difficult one because it's so easy to implement, yet so functionally a major issue that a lot of companies sit with. Believe it or not, you submitted this question. You're not the only one struggling with this. A lot of people and a lot of existing progressed companies sit with this issue as well, because most teams will say they value openness, but very few actually practice it because speaking up feels I'd say risky. People are constantly asking themselves, is it safe to challenge this? Will this backfire on me? And if the answer is unclear, silence wins. Creating a culture where people speak up doesn't start with encouraging words, it starts with how leaders actually respond. Because when someone raises a concern, do you defend immediately? Do you shut it down? Or do you actually listen and explore and respond kind of like more calmly, right? Your reaction trains the room. If people see that speaking up leads to tension or discomfort, they will stop. If they see that it leads to discussion and progress, they will actually continue. Psychological safety is not a policy, it's actually a pattern, and that pattern starts with the leadership behavior. And we spoke about leadership behaviors, I think, in our wisdom series, that you can also find on our YouTube channel, a lot specifically aiming at this pattern. Let's move to the next question. The next question, and I hope this answers your questions. If you've got follow-up questions, DM us. If you've got questions on your own as you're sitting here, you can DM us, you can join our newsletter, you can send it through. We tend to answer every single one. Live in this moment, we're working with questions that was submitted in the week. You can submit yours. But what I also do is I go back at the end of the section, quickly look at the comments, answer those. So if you've got questions and you didn't submit yours, you can write them in the comments, and at the end of the section, also in the live feed, I'll answer those. But if you're a bit shy and in the moment, you can submit them privately. As you see, we don't mention names. You can do so via the link or DM us, email us, and we'll answer it straight here. Just make the header off the cuff or live segment or Flamingo Friday, whatever you want to, so we know exactly what you're referring to. So the next question is, how do I sell when I feel like my product isn't perfect yet? Okay, this is a sales question, and we see it quite often. I'm going to sit in a position of hypocritical advice because I definitely have advice for both sectors. There's something called validating your product and validating your market and validating your audience, and we work a lot with that on XCAP side to validate the release function and therefore build a flow or system relating to that. But then there's also something that's kind of like the opposite advice that says that, a product doesn't need to be perfect to be tested out in the market. It doesn't actually need to exist even as well. So there's kind of like both advice, and I don't want to give both advice here. So I'm going to say it in the context that I first read it, because that's the purpose of off the cuff. But if you want more details on product market validation, why not reach out to us? We've got free consultation services. Just message me and I'll love to help explore your product and your service and the need for that in the market. Most founders, I'd say, delay selling because they want, the product to feel complete. And this is the angle that I'm going to give this advice on. It needs to be, sitting with this attitude that it needs to be polished, refined, needs to be ready. But here's the reality. Perfection is not what drives sales. Relevance drives sales. If your product solves a real problem, even imperfectly, people will engage. In fact, early selling is one of the fastest way to improve your product and to validate it in the first place. Because real feedback beats internal assumptions every single time. So instead of waiting for perfection or for perfect, focus on the usefulness, on the problem solving sides. Is it at least touching the surface of solving the problem? Is this valuable right now? Does it solve something meaningful in this space? If yes, then I would encourage you to actually start selling, because the market doesn't reward perfection. It rewards the progress, right? The next question is, why do I struggle to explain what my business actually does? Well, this feels like I've submitted that question because I'm a business consultant, and so many times in the room, people ask me, what do you do for a living? Now, I do a lot. I give free advice out to entrepreneurs and scalers, giving them this knowledge and feedback based on the system. So in a way, I am a content creator. I'm not an influencer, but I do create content on this for the heart of the entrepreneur. But then my company is a business consultancy, which works with process development, sales development, and company culture, which means that my company does one thing. I've got a role in my company, but I've also got a task assignment in my company. I don't do everything. I've got marketing teams, different leads across the world, doing different projects and different project management as such. And then there's me as an investor and co-investor and co-founder of separate business entities within my company with clients, developing tech, developing processes and communities out there. So whenever I speak to someone, I always want to say I'm an entrepreneur just to fast track that option. And I feel that when you write this question, you're in the same field because you are an entrepreneur, because every single day you might be sitting or putting on a new hat and doing something new. But this, obviously, speaking to people might look inconsistent and might look that you are not really trustworthy. So I get the struggle. And if you struggle to explain this, your customers understand it. And confusion kills that interest. So most founders are too close to their own product. That's what I'll say. They see all the layers, all the features, all the possibilities, but customers don't care about complexity. They care about outcomes. So instead of describing what you do, describe what changes for the customer. I found that better. I found that better to answer in this things of talking towards their problems and how I solve that, right? In a previous podcast, we talked about the name, aim, same, gain game. Kind of like game that you're playing, like introducing, when you introduce people in your network. It's a complex thing, but it touches on this, on how to introduce yourself and what you do to others so that they would actually remember it. It's a skill that I'm not going to re-mention here. It's a skill that I've mentioned so many times on our podcast. So yeah, I'd say describe what changes for the customer, what problem disappears when you work with them, what results improves, what becomes easier. Clarity is not about sounding impressive. We all want to do that. It's about being understood instantly, because if people don't get it, in essence, they won't buy it. Next question. How do I handle a client who keeps delaying decisions? Delays can really feel frustrating. You've had the conversations, there's interest. Interest, remember, doesn't guarantee intent, but there's alignment. And then obviously nothing. But delays usually mean one of three things. It means that there's a lack of urgency, a lack of clarity, or hidden objections. And pushing harder very rarely solves any of those. Instead, bring the conversation back to the impact, the same as the previous question. Like, what does it impact? What changes? What happens? What happens if they don't move forward? What's the cost of waiting? Help them see the consequences of inaction. Because people don't move when things are comfortable. They move when staying still becomes more painful than changing. And momentum requires that tension. Let's move on to the next question. And I hope that answers your question. How do I know if my business is actually scalable? Right. I've done a major, I'm going to give you some pointers, but I've done a major topic on this. Looks like today I keep on referring back to podcasts, but really our podcasts are, as these things come alight, we record something, or I record something, put it on Not Yet Mature, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. It's right there. Follow the links to get there. But I've done there a podcast segment, I think it was in 2025 or 2024, but if you scroll down, there's not too many, you'll find it, talking about a sellable company versus a scalable company, because people often treat a sellable company as something that's scalable and vice versa. And you need to understand there's a huge difference between the two. So really go listen to that podcast to get more depth. But just for the sake of off the cuff, I really want to emphasize that the scalability function sounds exciting, but most businesses aren't built for it. Even if they think they are, a scalable business can grow without breaking. And that usually comes down to three things again: repeatability, predictability, and simplicity. If every new client requires a completely custom approach, I would say, generally speaking, it's not scalable. If revenue is inconsistent, specifically looking at ARRs and MRRs, if that's inconsistent and really unpredictable, I'd say it's not scalable, generally speaking. If your systems rely heavily on you, that bottleneck we talked about, Slaying the Standard, a book that I recommend on overcoming that bottleneck quite often, I'll say on that, it's remark, it's definitely not scalable. Scaling isn't just growth, it's controlled growth. And control comes from a structure. But there's a lot more depth to that in any case. Next question. Why do I feel busy all day but accomplish very little? Noise, noise, noise. That's all I want to say. Being busy creates noise, and because of that noise, we think we're being productive. I'm actually doing a massive masterclass on productivity. Really, really something that you need to be, if you're serious about time management, productivity, being productive, really executing on tasks, really capitalizing on your time, being more effective, I want to urge you that is the best 3 hours you'll spend of your life. If you don't know where that is, comment, reach out to us. We'll share it later, but keep on with that. That is the most vital workshop that we ever do, is our productivity and time management workshop. Because activity is not the same as progress. It never is. And modern business makes it very easy to stay busy. There's messages, there's emails, there's meetings, there's quick tasks. So it feels productive, but often it's just reactive. Real progress comes, I'll say, usually comes from fewer, more focused actions. That's why that productivity sequencing is so important. The kind that require thinking, the kind that require effort, and that require time. So if your day is filled with small tasks, the best tip I'll give you in this response is to ask yourself, what did I actually move forward today? And if the answer is unclear, your time is being consumed and not really invested. Productivity isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters, but also knowing what matters and actually measuring the cause and effect thereof. It's a very balanced skill that a lot of people think they know because we're sitting with all the resources and books out there, but practical application is the key. So please come to that workshop. It will change your life. I literally guarantee you that. Next question. 3 more questions to go for Off the Cuff. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments. I'll have a look and answer them afterwards, or look at the link, submit them, and next week, next round, it might be one of the 12 that we answer. If you know a follow entrepreneur, business owner, startup, someone in management, someone in sales, share this along with them, make them part of the journey. Next question is, how do I make better decisions under pressure? So, off the cuff would be to say pressure doesn't create bad decisions. It actually doesn't. It exposes weak frameworks. That's what it does. When things move fast, you don't have time to overthink. So you rely on your default thinking patterns. That's why the habit stacking is so important and where that actually falls in. If those patterns are unclear or inconsistent, decisions feel chaotic because it is chaotic. The solution is to build simple decision filters in advance. Things like what matters most here, what are the risks, what aligns with our long-term direction. When those principles are clear, or at least clearer, pressure becomes because you're not starting from scratch every single time. Good decisions under pressure comes from preparation before the actual pressure. Let's look at the last 3 questions. How do I deal with seasons when nothing seems to be working? I almost want to say this is a boundary or borderline between culture, processes, but this for me is a faith element question. There are seasons in business where effort doesn't match results, especially for the entrepreneur. And a lot of time, I mean, I found it this week. You're showing up, you're doing the work, and still nothing seems to move. That's frustrating. And spiritually, it can feel confusing. But not all slow seasons are wasted seasons. Some are refining seasons. They build endurance, they sharpen perspective, they expose weaknesses that would have hurt you later on. The challenge is not to interpret delay as failure. Don't do that, right? Because growth isn't always visible immediately. I would say stay faithful in the process because consistency is the louder seasons. This forms directly part of our wisdom series, which you can join. Wisdom series is uploaded on YouTube. The references in our newsletter or the added resources, which is absolutely amazing, that will really steward and guide you on how to apply that wisdom in every single season of your business journey. The last two questions: how do I stay obedient when business opportunities conflict with my values? Right. So I just quickly go and check here in the chat on the top. I just want to open up that window. Okay, definitely gonna ignore that. Chat, not how do I stay obedient when business opportunities conflict with values? Not every opportunity is a good one, right? This is a difficult one to say, because even if it looks profitable, even if it accelerates growth, there will be moments where the easiest path forward conflicts with your principles. And those moments define you, because integrity is rarely tested when things are easy. It's tested when compromise is convenient. So you have to decide early, what are your non-negotiables. If those aren't clear, decisions become emotional, and you don't want to be emotional in driving forward. Emotions are there as indicators something is wrong. Emotions should never be in charge of stewarding the decision. But when they are clear, you don't debate, you should act, because honoring your values is more important than short-term gain. And over time, that consistency builds trust, both internally and externally. And then the last question for today: how do I trust God when outcomes don't match my expectations? Faith questions. I love these type of things. And the last question for today: if you've got any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Otherwise, I'm just going to say goodbye after this one. And some of the comments, thank you for my friends that are trolling me. Definitely going to ignore those. And definitely later going to put you in the spot, maybe screenshot some of those comments. But how do I trust when outcomes don't match my expectations? Expectation is a powerful thing. We plan, we prepare, we pray, and we expect a certain result, right? It's that internal expectations always there. So when the outcome doesn't match, it creates that tension. It's disappointments, confusion, and it even creates doubt, and a lot of doubt. But trust is not based on outcomes. It's based on believing something bigger than the outcome, something that believing in that you're not in control, you're in control of the stewardship, not of the outcome. You don't always, therefore, control the results, but you do control faithfulness. You do control obedience, and you do control the effort that you put in, that diligent effort that's required from the entrepreneur. And sometimes what feels like a setback is actually redirection. Even if you don't understand it yet, I would encourage you to say, trust doesn't mean everything goes away. It means you continue forward even when it doesn't. So thank you for joining today, and I'll see you next week.